Hi there. Welcome to the 17th Annual Damn Short Film Festival. We've reached the Filmmaker Q&A for Sci-fi B. I'm Lee Lanier. I'm one of the co-founders of the festival and also one of the programmers. We have several filmmakers here, so let's bring them in. Here we go. Hey there.
Hello, hello.
Hello, we have two. All right. We can start. I have a third who might pop in a little bit later, but that's okay. Let me have you guys introduce yourselves, mention what you worked on and what your role was. We'll start with Erin.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. My name is Erin Williams. I'm out here in Chicago. I was director, writer, and producer for Rapture. That was my first short film, so I was pretty excited about it and pretty happy with how it turned out. A lot of people here in the Chicago area worked on it, so I loved it. It was great.
Awesome. And Dustin?
Hi, yeah, I'm Dustin Curtis Murphy, writer, director, and also one of the co-producers of Samaritan, which was produced over here in the UK. Although I am American, I'm currently residing in the UK. So,
all right, and just in time, William, want to introduce yourself, mention your film, and what your role was?
Yeah, William Stribling. I directed The Speed of Time, which I also co-wrote with my writing partner Russ Nickel, who could not be here today. I'm in LA, and we shot in St. Petersburg, Florida, my hometown.
Awesome. So these are all dystopian films, but they're all very different. Some serious, some not quite so serious. I'll have each one of you answer why you think dystopian films are so interesting to people and why you personally were drawn to your particular film in terms of this movie. Let's start with Erin.
Sure. I mean, mine is kind of personal to the way I was raised. Like I grew up really religious, and so the short film kind of focuses on the question of whether supernatural events and things that could occur, can that be evidence of like, oh, it is real or it's true, or is it in your head? And so the short film and the feature that it's based on really explores that. And I just felt like putting it in like this rapture post-apocalyptic world was the best way to like illustrate that conflict, because it wasn't something where you could just ignore it like people do, like that question, like, oh, you don't talk about taxes, religion, and politics for a reason. But if you live in a world where you believe like half the people were taken, saved, rapture, maybe, or maybe you believe that they were abducted. So it's one or the other. So you live in that world that kind of pushes the conflict up front. And I don't know, I just think like apocalyptic dystopian stuff, it's just the conflict is everywhere, and it's just, I don't know what it is about us, but we are drawn to it. Just this world where there's always something happening, at least.
That's true. That's interesting. Just to refresh everyone's memory who might be watching, Rapture is the one that kind of fuses the biblical rapture with a sci-fi element. Like you said, you're not sure what's going on. With Dustin's film Samaritan, it's a little bit more serious film about the world is dying, correct? And people are trying to get off the earth, and there's conflict there. But you don't really see what's happening. So it's out there, but it's not right in front of you. Williams' film is just gonzo. It's like it's a parody of every single science fiction film ever made, pretty much every time travel trope. So but it qualifies as dystopian, I would say. It'd be hard to live in that world. So Dustin, so where did you find inspiration, and what do you think is so fascinating about the dystopian themes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always been a big fan of kind of sci-fi as social commentary and kind of sci-fi as a twisted lens to look at things that are very relevant to today's world. So being in the UK, we were very interested in kind of leading the audience to believe that we were making a film about Brexit, about the vote whether or not to leave the EU. And so for the majority of the film, you're watching it from that perspective, thinking that's what you're watching. And then you find out that it's actually the vote whether or not we should leave Earth or remain on Earth due to climate change. So I think for me, I've always loved dystopian futures, but so much about the present is dystopian. So I would just say, yeah, the social lens of looking at society through a fantasy and seeing how we can actually relate to it for the validation of our own experiences is kind of what makes it fascinating to me.
All right. And William, how about you?
Yeah, so I definitely have to agree with Dustin. I think the fun connection that comedy and sci-fi usually have is that they are using the genre to say something about something else. Usually, that's more often than not the case. I mean, obviously, our movie's an homage to the classic '80s time travel movies like Back to the Future. But I mean, I grew up loving stuff like Brazil, right? So it does ride that line of the Monty Python style humor with the really heavy, like, Orwellian dystopian stuff. And yeah, so I think that's kind of what we latched onto, was both the idea that sci-fi can operate really well as a social commentary, and then add the comedic layer on top of it to do something else.
All right, let's see. In terms of visual effects, the visual effects vary greatly. Obviously, you normally associate visual effects with sci-fi. So Dustin's film, really nothing. Basically, a couple guys in the woods talking about this. Erin's
Yeah.
film, a little bit, right? Occasionally, you see the spirits or whatever the creatures are.
Yeah,
And
there's a bit.
William, yeah, and in William, you just had effects everywhere. So
All real. No, it was all real. 100% in camera.
Nice.
No, man, you got some talent there. How important are visual effects to sci-fi? You see a lot of films these days where they're just over the top with visual effects. Is it ancillary? I mean, what's really the most important part of a sci-fi film? We'll start with Erin.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. You have three, directors here that made sci-fi based films, and there's a wide range of how much visual effects was used and how much wasn't. So I think it is pretty irrelevant as far as, if I'm going to make a sci-fi film, well, I got to call up my VFX guy and get him on board immediately. It's like, well, it's kind of as needed. And if there's a justifiable reason for you to have this kind of effect, because you can have a story that's just as compelling, in the woods, as you can have, something where it's in space. It doesn't have to be, so yeah, I mean, for me on my project, I'm trying to go more practical actually in the feature. So we're trying to do instead of having a CGI angel being, it'll actually be someone in a suit, and then we'll just add effects to make it brighter so that it feels more grounded, more real. And I think that's the right way to go if you can manage it, because there's so many sci-fi films being cranked out right now where it kind of is so fantastic that you just don't even care visually, because it's like, well, I can tell that this is not.
Yeah, for me personally, because I work in visual effects, it's like it might look real, but it's so over the top that you can't accept it intellectually. It's just like too much. Like, I don't care if it looks real. I can't see the whole build.
Realism and acceptance. That's interesting you say that, because they aren't the same thing.
Oh, they're not.
They're not.
I think people need to steer back to the story. How about your perspective on that, Dustin?
Yeah, for me, I've never been huge on special effects and incorporating them into any of my previous films. I've pretty much been story first with performances first. And most of the topics that I tend to gravitate towards aren't really things that need a lot of special effects. So I definitely agree with Erin. It's as needed, but certainly you don't have to check that off. So all sci-fis have to have special effects.
Right. And William?
Yeah, I agree with both of these guys. It's the ideas. The ideas should always come first. With The Speed of Time, that was the first time I'd ever really worked with any significant visual effects. But that said, as much as we have like lasers and portals and all that kind of fun stuff and explosions that are clearly visual effects, most of the stunts and a lot of the effects we did practically. I mean, even the opening gag of John crashing through the ceiling, falling through the table, that was 99% practical with just a little dust added for effects. So we tried to use visual effects. Also, the budget wasn't very big, so we tried to use the VFX budget wisely to enhance things. And we had the benefit of having really talented stunt people on the day. So it's like, well, if you can do a backflip off this table and crash through this other guy, then why wouldn't we do that and get it in camera? There's something really tactile that you can't really achieve at our budget level. So yeah, it's for us, it was about using the VFX to enhance the story and to enhance the comedy too. I think that was a big part of it.
Now, with your film, William, were there specific callbacks to certain films? Did you go and watch all your 80s sci-fi films, or did you have them memorized at that point? You just knew what was supposed to happen?
I pretty much have Back to the Future memorized, at least the first two movies. We didn't go back and try and reference anything really specifically, if that makes sense. It was just the things that were still stuck in our brains about all the tropes that we love and love to hate in these films, and all the paradoxes that are created. So we tried to stack as many on top of each other as we possibly could. But no, we didn't go back and pull any specific references to try and keep it away from being parody, you know.
Well, it's good. I mean, I couldn't identify any particular film, but more just the mood and the style. Yeah, which is interesting.
Feels familiar.
Yeah. And that's a good distinction, because there are parody films out there, and they tend to lose steam. They don't play as well with the audience unless the audience really knows what you're parodying. So it gives you more flexibility. So let me go to Erin and Dustin, and I'll start with Erin. Was there any particular inspiration, influence from other filmmakers, other films, other genres?
For sure. Because early on, I was thinking how I wanted to kind of create this. Initially, it wasn't even a world. I was like, what if I just do kind of like almost like a Honey Boy-esque kind of film, where it's like it's portraying my experience going from, Mormon missionary to, who I am today. And I thought about it, and I was like, I guess that'll be interesting enough, but what if I can put it in a world where there's more dramatic context around it? And so that had me started thinking about the movie like Lights Out, if you've seen that one, where it's this monster being that's only in the dark. And I'm like, if you flip that on its head, you have these, some people believe angels, some people believe they're monsters, but they only appear in the light. And it kind of plays on this, what would you want to be true? You would assume that because they appear in the light, they're wonderful, beautiful, perfect beings, but they do have a tendency to behave opposite in certain situations. So yeah, I just thought of ways that I could have like other films like that one, where the actual world is kind of telling a little bit of the story and trying to echo the same themes, as opposed to just a straight kind of docu-pic kind of thing.
And Dustin?
Yeah, me and my fellow producer, Adnan Raja, have a love of M. Night Shyamalan, so we're referencing him quite a bit. I think as far as the visual style of the film, it's very similar to something like The Village, or also The Road with Viggo Mortensen. So it's kind of more in that really bleak, forested, natural world visually. But the entire concept from the film sprung out of a brief called the Uncertain Kingdom Grant, which was a grant where they were going to finance, I think, 10 different creative projects, all based on the fact that England was going to be leaving the EU as part of Brexit, and what does that mean? So that was kind of our jumping off point. We ended up not getting it, but decided to just trudge forward through it anyways. So that was kind of our main catalyst and some of our references.
All right, interesting. Now, all of you have made multiple short films, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, except Erin?
Now I have a second one done. Hasn't been released yet, but
all right. The question I was going to ask was, now that you've had a couple of films finished and been on the festival circuit, your experience with showing at film festivals, has that affected how you're going to make films, or has it affected how you've made films, since you have the experience of showing it with a wide variety of audiences to see where it's been accepted and rejected? Have you changed your style any? I'll start with William, because I know you've had several films with us in the past.
Yeah, this is the 6th time I think I've been with you guys, which is 6th time. Yeah, I know. I'm so bummed.
That's close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of shorts anymore, kind of unfortunately, because I enjoy the festival circuit so much. I don't think, other than length, that's the one thing that I've taken away from festivals. Your chances of getting programmed are so much higher if your movie is shorter. The shorter, the better. This is coming from someone who's made like 30-minute short films, and like taking them around. But I will say that the time is it's a lot. And then you're also an audience member in so many blocks, and you sit there and you'll watch a 30, 35-minute short film, and you feel how you made other people feel sitting through your 30-minute short. So that definitely, it's stuck in my head. And I guess anytime I have a short idea now, if we're going to go out and do something, I try and keep it short. With The Speed of Time, the premise was, can we cram a feature action sci-fi time travel movie into 10 minutes? And I say we failed because it's 12 minutes long. But that was the idea, like get it as tight as it possibly can be. And I mean, I think the festival thing has been great for me just because I've met so many incredible people. The networking, it's like it's worth making a film just to take it out and meet new people. I mean, I've hired people that I've met networking at festivals and vice versa, and collaborated with others, many of whom I met at the Damn Short Film Festival. So it's definitely inspiring. I will say that every time I go out to a festival with a film, I think, I can't wait to do this again. And with features, it's just so few and far between. It's like years, but a short, you can theoretically throw together pretty quickly and get it out there.
Yeah. Dustin, how about you?
Yeah, I'm actually a festival director as well, for a film festival that we run here in London. We have a network of about 1,500 short filmmakers in a network called Kino Short Film. Oh, yes. And we've created the People's Film Festival, which I'm the festival director of. And that experience has really been, I think, just really enlightening to experience it from both sides, to see what else is out there. I mean, just watching infinite amount of short films to see what you compare against and say, oh yeah, that one's better than mine, or, oh, that one's worse than mine. Oh, but it placed here, so maybe I could place there. And, just generally, get a vibe for the circuit, because it's infinitely competitive. I think, we're living in a time where it's never been easier for somebody to make a short film, which is creating so much content. Yeah. So it's almost never been harder to actually get your short film accepted to festivals. So the majority of people have just such, majority of filmmakers just have such a high, rejection rate that, when you do get those acceptances to the film festivals, it feels so good, because I think the average acceptance rate for filmmakers is about 10% of what they submit to actually accepts them. So it's absolutely great to get in the room with people and to see it on the screen, or, now we're doing it all virtually. But yeah, a lot to be learned. That could be an entire conversation of what you can learn.
That's interesting to hear. All right. How about, I know, Erin, you kind of more new to this, but any insight to the festival circuit in your filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned a lot just from this first one, and now making the second one, which is called Singulate. This first one is kind of a snapshot of, the full broader story. I wanted people to leave it with questions, hopefully good questions, not confusion questions. But the second short film that I've done already, it's a lot more beginning, middle, end. So you get within those 6-7 minutes, you get a story that you can put together. So that was something that I think is going to probably do a little bit better as far as the short film medium. So it has a little bit more of gratification within those 6-7 minutes. But beyond that, I mean, short films are great, but I would definitely prefer to try to move into doing features. I know that's a pretty big step to try to do that. Go from, I already know already, like you can get your friends together and make a short, but it's pretty hard to get your friends together and make like a full feature unless you're asking a lot from them. So that process, it is exciting, but that's what I'm probably going to look forward to in the future, is try to actually do features as opposed to the shorts, and then obviously do those as I can. But I don't think considering the festivals will change what type of films I make, because if I start making films just based off of what I think will be successful or what will do well, that's basically a day job, and that's the whole thing I'm trying to get away from. You know what I mean? I sell insurance because it pays the bills. I think it'll do well. but I don't want to make films that as well, where I'm just making a film because I think it'll do well, but it's not my passion. I'm already doing that right now, so I don't need two of those, if that makes sense. So I'll always do whatever I think.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point about the passion of short filmmaking, because short filmmaking in and of itself is not exactly a good way to earn a living. It might lead to other opportunities, but so a lot of people are in there making it for a personal reason. Do you each want to speak to that, William?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Short films, definitely through festivals and through the internet, have a platform, right? Like you can get a bunch of eyeballs on your movie, but there's no real profit model, at least in the US, in any significant way. So it's experimental. It is a really unique art form that is unlike feature film. You can get away with something in a 5-10 minute film that you absolutely can't get away with in 90 minutes, 2 hours plus, all of that. So I love short form movies as a as a diversion, right? It's something different. It works different muscles. Feature filmmaking, for the most part, is a recognized format. There is story structure that most people agree to a certain extent, and if you want to get your movie played in front of audiences, there are certain things you have to do. But with a short film, the sky is the limit. There is a festival out there that will program your short if it's any good. And I love short film festivals that celebrate the more interesting, unique stuff, the stuff that's not always just made as a piece of branded content or as a calling card for a feature film, where like there's a lot of versions of shorts out there, but to Erin's point, to fit a full story in 5 to 7 minutes is kind of beautiful, and I love sitting in a movie theater all day long just watching short films. They're great.
How about you, Dustin?
What was the initial prompt question?
Oh, I done forgot already. We're talking about.
I was just so fascinated with everything William was saying. I was like,
where is raptured there? No, about the importance of the passion of being a short filmmaker, because it's not something you really make necessarily.
Yeah. It's pretty much all on passion, because it's things that you have to make on a micro budget. There's not much to play around with. You're not going to get that much investment money to play with, because those investors aren't going to get their money back. So yes, I would say, to Erin's point, I do hope that my short filmmaking does lead to feature filmmaking. I'm working on my first feature at the moment, and still trying to bring the passion that I have for short film into something that's a little bit more sustainable as well, rather than always dipping into your pocket to make the art to entertain people.
Let's talk about the fact that you guys are in different locations. Dustin's in the UK. William, you shot yours in Florida. Where are you from? Or where do you
live? I live in Los Angeles.
Or LA, okay. And then Erin, where are you located?
I'm in Chicago.
Chicago. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of where you are. Now, some of it is the difference in countries, where you might have a film board in the UK where we don't really have that in the US. But then again, Chicago might be very different from LA in terms of definitely pros and cons at each location. You want to each talk about that? We'll start with Erin.
Yeah, honestly, I moved to Chicago about 2 years ago, and I just decided I wanted to move here. And my day job, I work from home anyway, so I can kind of be wherever I wanted. So it was either go to LA or go to maybe New York. But I just felt like New York was going to be too expensive. All my short film budget was just going to go towards rent. So I was like, I'm going to pass on that. And then LA, I just started doing this, so I was like, it's going to be probably pretty oversaturated. I think there's a lot of guys like me that are like, I'm just going to move to LA and I'm going to start making movies. I'm like, I don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to get a hold of people that will work with me. So I came to Chicago, and it's been great, man. Like my director of photography, Mark Manet, I just sent him my script, and he's a fantastic, very well-known cinematographer here. And he was like, hey, let's work on something together. I like this. It's like a perfect medium in my mind, where it's a very strong film community, but you can get access to some really talented people that know everyone else. So I was really happy with my decision to come to Chicago, film here. There's a lot of cool locations, like all the like abandoned buildings in the beginning of Rapture, this post-apocalyptic. That's just like right there in Gary, Indiana, which is like my favorite place. Now, I didn't know that I had such an obsession with like abandoned architecture until I went there, and I was like, I can't leave. Like, there's a whole hospital. Guys, there's so much more footage that we got. And I was like, can we just do like 10 minutes of just abandoned hospitals and high schools? Because this is sick. But we had to cut it down. But yeah, so I've been really happy with being here. And apparently there's like a good tax credit. They give you like 30%, but the budget wasn't at that level. But for features, it's a transferable tax credit. So filming in Illinois is actually a pretty good idea.
Any disadvantages to Chicago? Is there any difficulty with permits or locations or anything like that? Or?
Not really, honestly. Parking, my second short film, parking was a bit of a bitch because we're trying to use somebody's garage. And we're trying to bring a whole production truck into their back alleyway, and people were not happy about that. And so like parking in the tight area of the city can be tough, but at the end of the day, you can always find something a little bit more outside of the city.
All right, cool.
So.
How about you, Dustin?
Well, I lived in I was born and raised in California, and I only moved to the UK in 2017. So, at first it was, kind of difficult to get established in, a brand new city. I live in London, to try to, meet people. But, after not that long, I realized, it's actually kind of easier to climb the ladder when you're not living in the epicenter where literally everybody's trying to do what you're doing. So I would say the career progress that I've made in 3 years of living in London is more than I made in 10 years of living in LA. As far as disadvantages, you have less diversity when it comes to locations. England's pretty much the same everywhere that you go, and you start writing your narratives that are utilizing what England has to offer, as opposed to California. You got, vineyards and deserts and beaches and, everything very close. So it's, a really good back lot that you have there.
And William.
Yeah, LA's got incredible access to locations. Unfortunately, they're all so expensive. So when we were looking at our budget for The Speed of Time and what we were trying to pull off, it was borderline unfeasible to do it in LA. And the film commissioner in St. Pete, Florida, has always been asking me to bring something to town, and they have a pretty decent incentive program down there. And he was able to hook us up with incredible locations for, if not free, very, very, very inexpensive, contacts with the local crew and flights and hotels and gear. It was just too hard to pass up, like that. We got so much more production value out of shooting in Florida than we would have in LA, although almost everyone, cast and crew, was just flown in from LA. We did hire day players locally, and the crew, the keys were all flown in. Everyone else was a local hire. But yeah, it was kind of weird to have the LA crew out there in Florida on the beach making a film. But I think we're all seeing a lot more of that now with various states and their tax incentives. And it's just cost prohibitive to shoot here in LA unless you're, working on something with a much larger budget, like a commercial or a feature film. So yeah, I mean, I like being here, but I also like having the excuse to go elsewhere to shoot, and you get cool locations that other people, haven't already put in their movies. Can't tell you how often you just turn on the TV and you're watching something and it's like the same damn location over and over again, because, there's only 30 miles worth of locations out here that we all have access to, and they're eventually going to get reused. So I love going out and finding unique spots.
Yeah, I still recognize locations from working on productions 20 years ago. It's like, oh, it's a gas station again. Okay, that's cool. Did you guys shoot your films before the pandemic? I guess, right? All pre-pandemic?
Yeah.
I guess you had to edit in quiet, in silence inside. You're right.
Took my sweet time. Yeah. Because as like festivals were canceling left and right, and I was like, I'll take our time with the VFX. And like at one point you're telling your VFX artist like, hey, we want to get this done at this certain deadline, and then all of a sudden the world goes to hell and you're like, you know what? You want to take like 6 months getting that done. Like, I don't think there's any reason. I have nowhere to release this to right now. So do whatever you want. So we got it done eventually.
Were any of you guys tempted to run out and do a apocalyptic world is empty film because everything was kind of empty for a while?
I already did.
He's like done.
I'm sure we're going to see quite a few pandemic films next year. We got a few this year, but not too many. It's going to be all those empty street films next year. All right, so let's try this question. You're all slightly different levels of filmmaking in terms of how many years you've been doing it, your experience, but what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about getting into filmmaking through shorts? Anything you've learned along the way, or something you'd like to tell yourself, a younger self? So let's start with Erin.
Yeah, honestly, weirdly enough, when I came to Chicago, I emailed a college professor for a film school, and I was like, hey, I don't really have the time to go to school, but would I be able to pay you like an hourly rate on the side to kind of coach me along? I want to get into filmmaking. And he emailed me back, and he's like, listen, if you have the income to just pay me an hourly rate, he's like, just use that money that you were going to do that and just get a crew together and make your own stuff. He's like, just do it. He's like, because there's nothing that I'm going to tell you in a room that you're not just going to learn immediately when you're on set and you realize, oh, this isn't going to work at all. So, that would be my advice, is put yourself in a position where you can make as many mistakes as quickly as possible. Like, fail at an accelerated rate if you want to get going fast. Because if you're going to be someone that's like, well, I don't know if I'm ready for this or that, it's like no one's ready for anything ever. So just get in there, look like an idiot. Like my first day on set, like literally, it was my first time I had ever been on set was for Rapture, and even the PAs, even everybody else had been on set way more than I had. And I was supposed to be the guy in charge, and I would say dumb stuff. I told everyone at the beginning, I'm like, I'm going to say the dumbest stuff you're ever going to hear. Like the scene with all the extras, there's like 30 people on set. I get up there and I'm like, all right, so we need, the extras, like 15 to 20 of them. We need you guys kind of have some dialogue in the back while they're having this conversation. And then my DP is like, hey, no, that's all going to be put in post. You don't want them to say anything. And I have to turn around to everybody. I'm like, so everything I just said, no, don't do any of that. So, I just went in there, threw the ego out the window. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but everybody else here believes in the project like I do. So we're just going to figure it out as we go. And it was a lot more fun. And I feel like, that would be my advice to anybody. Try to fail as quickly as possible.
That's great advice. I mean, just like the fact you owned the fact that you weren't sure what was going on. You just owned it. Just like, why not? How about you?
I mean, I think Erin nailed it as far as that is probably the most important thing is I see too many short filmmakers spin their wheels wanting their first project, their debut project to be so perfect that they never end up actually, completing that project, or it takes several years to make, or they make it, they're not happy with it, so they don't show it to anybody, because I think showing it is also a very important growth tool for filmmakers. Get in the room, see how people are reacting to your film. Maybe something you thought wasn't working, you discover is getting a laugh or is getting a reaction from the audience, or suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, my film's way too long and everybody's bored, and now I can tell. So do make as many projects, get those projects seen, find any way to get those projects seen, move on to the next one, and always just try to do better than what you did before, rather than comparing yourself to, one of the best directors' debut films.
Right. That's another good point. I mean, because we do get, and you've seen this yourself through your film festival, there's films that range from $50 to $75,000 easy, right? So it's a really big range. You can't quite compare yourself to everyone. Not quite fair. How about you, William?
Yeah, those guys had brilliant things to say. I second all of it. I had a teacher who once said, your film isn't done until it screens for a room full of people that you don't know. And I have to totally agree with that. So crank out as many films as you can. Don't spend money if you can help it. on short films. You don't need it. If there are resources available, use those resources. You know, if someone offers you a little time to work on some VFX, or they offer you a house or a car, or, you know, some other location that you can use, but don't spend money. You don't need it. You don't need it. The best short films are really, really low budget. And I think the other thing too that a lot of people feel when they start filmmaking is they feel the pressure of being responsible as a director for the whole thing, and that becomes really lonely really quickly. And I think, or I've come to think, that directing is really just the art of collaboration, the art of getting a group of people to work together, and then, you know, like it's not about one person telling everyone what to do. It's about inspiring everyone in the same direction, and the more the merrier, right? Leave the ego at the door, and the best idea wins.
Good. Let's see. We have about 10 minutes. What would you say is the most important element of a short film, or maybe there's multiple important elements? You know, story development, character development, editing. It could be all those things. Let me speak to that, Erin.
I mean, honestly, I think the most important element would be having a vision from the get-go, because I noticed the script that I wrote, as opposed to what we shot, as opposed to what was finally finished editing, it was like 3 separate films. So, but you have to have that core of like, why is this film even being made in the first place, so that you make sure that as all the, you know, genius creative hands touch it as it goes along, you have your cinematographer, your editor, your everybody, you just want to make sure as a director that what the initial vision is still there. No matter what happens to the structure of the story, whatever happens, you have the idea of this story is trying to say something, it's trying to do something, and as long as, you know, whatever we do creatively to it, you just want to make sure that that's still there. Because that's the thing, it changes so much as you go through. And for me, that was really the core of it, because there were opportunities to shoot things very differently, or people had ideas early on, especially when you read the script and like, oh, what if you do this? And you're like, well, that's a totally different movie that we're now suggesting. So you kind of have to reel things in. So yeah, I think having a vision and staying true to that as you make all the different movies that this thing eventually becomes, as you get that final product, it's still there.
Would you say that's the most critical thing for a director to do, is making sure that it's all cohesive?
Yeah. Yeah, I think being open to, you know, like, there's going to be people that, like, my editor is always going to be a way better editor than I'll ever be. You know, my cinematographer is the same. You know, I can't touch a camera anywhere the way he can. So there are people that are going to be better at certain tasks, that you just have to have a balance of letting them be better than you at that task, but also kind of directing them in a way that's like, all right, we want to stay along this line, that this is the story we're still telling, just making sure that everyone's doing the best of their ability and staying consistent with the actual overall end goal.
All right. How about you, Dustin?
Well, from my personal note, I would say the thing that I always focus on an elevated level is performance. You know, if people aren't believing the scene that you're putting in front of them, if audiences don't, you know, relate to the people on screen, even if you have a brilliant script, even if it's shot really well, they're not going to have that emotional response to it. So I always kind of elevate that. As a festival programmer, I will say the #1 mistake that people make who submit to our film festival is they don't prioritize their sound. They sometimes have a beautiful looking film, but they, you know, didn't get the right guy to be the boom operator or the right person to mix it in post-production. So it sounds really, really bad. Audiences are much more forgiving of, you know, a gritty, flawed visual look than they are of flawed audio. So, yeah, always try to nail the sound.
I would agree with you. There's been many films we've seen that have been sunk by the sound, or you just can't understand the dialogue. And part of that might be the performance. You said performance also, right? Is delivery. It's just like, the mumbling or whatever, and the bad sound. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm having a hard time sympathizing with you. I don't know what's going on. But it could be gorgeous cinematography and great idea and all that. Liam, how about you?
That was what I was going to say exactly. Very practical advice of make sure your sound is on point. If I can offer anything else that I think is important, and it's not in the finished film, it's the making of it, it's just thank people for working on your movie. You know, at the end of every day, shake everyone's hand and just thank them for what they did, because there's no way they got paid enough to be there. I don't care what short film set you're on. There ain't no way anyone else got paid enough to be there. So they are there for your vision, to support you. Just make sure you show your love and feed them well. Food goes a long way. That's another thing.
Another good point. We'll have to make this is recorded, so people need to study this later on. It's sound good food. Thank them. Those are all great ideas. Maybe one final question here for each of you. What is the most exciting thing to you in terms of the future of film that may be coming up? It could be developments in technology, developments in form, like the long form that we see now, or just anything on the horizon. Erin, how about you?
Well, personally, I just think the opportunities to actually get things made. I mean, there's a lot more competition. I feel like you look at, Netflix, Amazon, I think Apple's trying to do stuff. There's just a lot of, like, YouTube's making films and stuff. There's just so much that people are actually competing to try to get stuff made. I mean, I can't imagine what it was like 50 years ago when it was like 3 channels on TV and you had like 2 movie studios. Like, how in the world do you possibly get in there? But now I feel a lot more confident, a lot more optimistic moving forward that there is going to be a spot, for someone like me coming in as a new guy, figuring out, who I am as a director, what my tone is, and that there's going to be opportunities for me to step in on projects and help. So yeah, that would be mine. It doesn't seem so centralized. It seems like there's more opportunities around the area for everybody.
That's a great thing. How about you, Dustin? Oh, Dustin is locked.
All right. Yeah, I think I was a bit glitchy there. Yeah, I would agree. I would say, the accessibility to it is, I think, one of the most interesting things. I think maybe getting over the initial thing of wanting to be one of the top Hollywood debut films of a director of all time, and realizing that now is actually probably the easiest time to get your film made. I think that's the future, is everyone's going to be making film, everyone's going to be making content. So you kind of finally can get these visions out of your head and onto the screen, and hopefully get those to audiences.
All right, William.
Yeah. I know that we're all moving in the direction of streaming services being the premier launch, place for, premiering a feature film. But I think specifically because of COVID, we might see a great little decade of the boom of indie cinemas. I'm hopeful that when movie theaters reopen, there's going to be a good niche for indie cinema, like the Alamo Draft Houses of the world, the Lemleys, like we have out here, and ArcLight and all of that. These movie theaters that were struggling up until the pandemic, if they can pull through this, I think people are going to flood back to see high quality movies in the theater again. So I am hopeful for that, knowing full well that the future is online, it is streaming, it's Netflix, it's like, that's where we're all going for our movies. I think there will be a fun little niche carved out for people who still want to go and gather in a room with strangers and watch a big old screen.
That's all very good, exciting stuff. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I want to thank all you guys for joining us. Hope you have a chance to hang out at the festival. You're welcome a little while. And hopefully we'll see films from you guys in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Nice meeting you guys.
All right.
Great to meet everyone.
You too.